All right, part two on week 9, still looking at politics. In this particular part, we're going to be looking more at politics and government in Canada, and then also some of the major political issues within Canada. And I mentioned in part 1 at the introductory was it's around, Quebec separation and their initiative to do that, and Aboriginal self-government. We'll just touch on those two topics and look at a bit of a timeline. We're also going to look at politics and the economy because they are closely related in terms of the decisions, depending upon the type of government operates in a country, can influence the economy. The economy being, we'll look at definition about economy and what that is. And then we'll look at the global economic systems in terms of which different systems are there across the world, and we'll look at some of the political issues in the future, what might be up and coming in the future for politicians or politics to have to address. Some questions to be thinking about as we go through this chapter. What are the major political systems? Do we know what they are and what some of the differences are? Whose interests are being reflected in political decisions? You sometimes may wonder, some of the decisions get made by governments, who influences those decisions? Are we all a part of that, or are some more special interest groups having bigger favor? We're going to look at that. How is government shaped by political parties and political attitudes? We'll touch briefly on that. And what is nationalism why is nationalism such an important force in today's world? And touch on, what is the place of democracy in the 21st century? Where is it going? And with the recent election in the United States and the ripple effect that it's had around the world, we might start to see changes in not only democracy, but politics. Certainly going to see and feel the impact of economics. And so we'll see where this chapter takes us and how we can think in regards in terms of the future about where politics either moves us or leads us or pushes us. All right, let's get started. Okay, we're going to start with looking at politics and the government of Canada. And the first thing is we're going to look at a couple of sort of definitions, but we're just sort of reviewing politics in Canada. Political party. Now, this is an organization whose purpose is to gain and hold legitimate control over the government. And now there's certain elements to it. They develop and articulate policy positions. So each political party has their own policy positions in terms of what they think would be best for those citizens and issues in Canada. 2, they educate voters about the issues and simplify the choices for them. And so part of their goal is to communicate to everybody. And you've probably heard different messages from different candidates over the course of any given year about what they think is important. And then thirdly, they recruit candidates. And so when we think in terms of political parties, there's a traditional liberal and progressive conservative, but there's other newer ones, the New Democratic Party, Social Credit, Bloc Québécois, Reform, then Alliance. The New Conservative Party, the one that was established in 2003, is a union of the Alliance and the Conservative Party, Progressive Conservative Party. So Progressive Conservative Party and the Alliance joined together to become the Progressive Conservatives in 2003. So when we think in terms of political parties, why do some people vote and others do not? Why do people vote for one party and not another? Well, let's explore that a little bit. There are 3 major factors, actually. Political socialization is one factor. This is the process where people learn political attitudes and behaviors from family, friends, and the media. So one of the ways that people generate their reasons for voting or who they'll vote for is whatever kind of family dialogues occurred over the dinner table or at home, or what you hear from your friends, or your own searching through media. If you're on social media, then chances are there's times when you see political messages and that you should learn this and know about that. And then your own searching. So that's political socialization, where you learn over time that politics is important in your life, or that politics is not important in your life, or it doesn't really matter because you don't have your single little vote won't make a big difference. That's political socialization. The second factor is what's called political attitudes. And here, people tend to vote for those who represent their social and economic attitudes. So the more you've thought about what's important to you, what's of value, both politically or economically or socially, then there's a tendency for you to look for the party that best represents your social economic attitudes, and that's who you'll tend to vote for. And that's political attitudes having an influence on whether or not you vote or who you vote for. And then lastly, are economic issues. People in upper class tend to be conservative, whereas those in middle and lower class tend to be liberal. Yet, in Canada, there's little evidence for this. Now, part of the reason is each of the political parties has different economic policies. The Conservatives have a policy that tends to be around supporting corporations in a manner that they will produce more jobs that people who don't have jobs could be doing. So there's a bit of a tendency towards supporting richer people to produce the jobs for poorer people. Now that's an oversimplification, so please, this is not me expressing one opinion or another about political parties. It's more just around their differences. Now the Liberals tend to have built the social safety net for people, welfare if you will. And so the reason that it's argued that Liberals tend to be supported by the lower middle class is because they tend to support people who may not have works or may not have proper medication and health care by looking after some of those economic issues. And so economic issues might influence the way you vote based on where you stand on the overall income levels. So why? Well, immediate issues and the leaders were strong predictors than class. So the argument in terms of this separation occurs isn't strong in Canada because there's a tendency for people in Canada to look to the leader and say, I like that person more and I'll vote for them, or I don't like any of the candidates and I don't think I'll vote. Mainstream parties have been able to implement the desire of the other parties, subjective reasons. People vote for those who reflect their own interests. There's lots of reasons why people don't vote. The better approach to take is that if you don't vote, you don't have a voice. If you don't have a voice, you can't complain about the government. So political participation. Well, get out and vote when that opportunity comes. Less involvement in voting between 1988, where there were 75%, and 2008, where 59%. We've been showing less involvement in voting. Higher rates in Western Europe, lower rates of participation among young Canadians. Now the question would still be, why? Well, some of the issues why there's low participation is illness and disability has been argued. People don't want change. People feel alienated. It's argued that the Canadian youth have felt alienated, wondering what's in it for me and how does what I hear from the politicians affect me. Governments were made for the industrial age. Our society is beyond that, so perhaps that's part of the reason. And one other argument is that there's less confidence in the government doing its work. So voting, we can probably understand, is important. Now, can we simply vote for things that have them change, or do some issues evolve over time? We're going to look at two Canadian issues that tend to have evolved over time and are yet to be totally resolved. So when we start with this, we're going to start with Quebec. Now, Quebec, since 1960, there have been major changes in the status of Quebec in the federal union. In 1960, the Quiet Revolution from a traditional Catholic province to a more modern secular one. In 1962, the call for Liberals for people to be masters of their own house. There was some success. The French would be the official language of that province. In 1969, Trudeau, from Quebec, enshrined Canada as a bilingual state. Through the 70s, the separatist party Québécois, gained power. In 1995, there was a close defeat of separatism. This was also divided on language and cultural issues. 2003, Jean Claret and the defeat of the Parti Québécois and the rise of the Liberal Party. In 2006, there was recognition of Quebec as a nation. And so the issues haven't disappeared. They've been ongoing for years, and they will likely continue for many more to come until there is some sort of either a decision or a sort of an acceptance or a morphing of Canada to include Quebecois issues. Now, we can also say the same about issues as it relates to Indigenous people. Some of the issues regarding Indigenous people's issues include self-government, First Nations movement, the emergence of the Nunavut territory in the Eastern Arctic, land claims as part of sovereign movement. Some of the history here from back in 1763, where there was the creation of the treaties. That was 1763. In 1876, the Indian Act with complete control by the federal government. Residential schools, no freedom of passage, no right to vote. In 1969, the White Paper was introduced, and it was to assimilate. Now, you can go back into your previous chapters to see what assimilate meant. Aboriginals into Canadian society, and the response was a new sense of Aboriginal identity, creation of the assemblies of First Nations, dismantling Indian affairs, excuse me, and the right of Aboriginals to self-government. That was in 1996, and in 1999, the Nunavut territory was agreed to and recognized. And so there's been growth. It's been very, very slow growth, particularly if you are Indigenous yourself. It does speak to the significance of those issues, the size and breadth of Canada to address all kinds of issues at the same time. However, it's got to be very frustrating for people of Quebec and people of Indigenous background to see such slow progress on some of these issues. But it's not because politics is about speed, and it's about multiple interests, and different political parties have different agendas when it comes to major Canadian issues. All right, let's touch base now on politics and the economy. Clement and Drache outline issues issues that Canadian sociologists and economists have addressed using the political economy perspective, implications of external relations for internal development, colonial ties to France, the United Kingdom, and independence on the U.S. You're looking at the trading dollars and billions of dollars and who Canada trades with. And this isn't limited to just the countries on the docket here. If you search, you'll find that Canada trades with certainly way more than just these countries. There's a dependence on external markets. That is to say, 20 years ago, globalization emerged, and this is where countries were sharing the development of companies. So companies that were in the United States or Canada also branched out into other parts of the world and found that a greater dependence became on different parts of the world. The effect of technology and the ownership of that technology has a profound impact on politics and economy. The continued survival of two nations within a single state, French and Indigenous. So some of the issues highlight the interdependence of economic and political power. There's not a decision that can be made in one country that doesn't affect many others. We'll look at the global economic system next. And here we're going to see that there's basically two dominant economic models, capitalism and socialism. Sociology uses two criteria to distinguish between the two types of economy: property ownership and market control. So if we begin with capitalism, it's an economic system characterized by private ownership of the means of production from which personal profit can be derived through market competition and without government intervention. So if we look at that, so you have private ownership, so you can own stuff and make money from it. In fact, you can pursue your own personal profit and make money off it personally. That there's a free market competition. You can compete against, if you wanted to start your own phone company, you compete against Bell, TELUS, Rogers. You have the right to do that in a capitalist society. And lack of government intervention. Now, you'll find this very big in the United States. It is an issue in Canada, where the Republicans at this particular time are groups that don't want much government intervention. They like to see the government protect their property and to protect their businesses, but not to govern what they can and cannot do. So in a capitalist system, you have more freedom to make your profit. Then that doesn't mean everybody seems to have the same freedom, unfortunately. Some special terms. Now, one of the terms is corporation. Now, large-scale organizations have legal power, such as the ability to enter into contracts and buy and sell property separate from their own individual owners. Now, multinational corporations, these are large corporations that are headquartered in one country and have subsidiaries or branches in other countries. And the image you're seeing here is you're seeing Kraft, Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, P&G, Nestle, Johnson & Johnson, Unilever, Mars, and Kellogg's, and General Mills. You're seeing them all in the middle, but all the other companies on the outside are all the holdings of all those individual companies. They are not just single companies. These are multinational companies. You could even argue them to be oligopoly, which is a term used around several companies overwhelmingly control the entire industry. Now, you'll see that within Mars and the number of chocolate bar companies that they have. You'll see that within Unilever. So conglomerates are combinations of businesses in different commercial areas, all of which are owned by one holding companies, and these will be an example of conglomerates as well. And so this is one of the benefits and one of the shortcomings of a capitalist society. So let's look at socialism as an alternative. Now, socialism is an economic system characterized by public ownership. So it's not owned by individuals, but it's owned by groups or organizations or by government. So the means of production is owned by government. The pursuit of collective goals, so rather than personal goals, it's the goals for everybody, that anything that I would choose to do would be done for the better good of all. And it involves centralized decision making. So instead of one person making the decision or a small group of people, there would be an ability to have more people, more citizens, if you will, be sharing in the responsibility of decision making. So here we see public ownership means of production, pursuit of collective goals, and centralized decision making. Now, within socialism, there is what's known as a mixed economies, and this combines elements of market economy, which is the capitalist perspective, with elements of command economy, of socialism. There's no economy that is truly capitalist or socialist anymore. And then lastly, political issues for the future. Well, with increased economic unity in the global world and independence of each nation is called into question, and with the more recent political shifts that have occurred in the world, there's lots of different issues that can be influencing what's in the future, and maybe even having a lot more insecurity about what might be occurring. We may not know. One is around, certainly, multinational corporations. They tend to be more powerful than some nation states. Some countries aren't as powerful as some of these corporations, and that could be a strength, and it could most certainly be a weakness. Issues of international terrorism can have a big impact on the political and economic future. Proliferation of nuclear weapons. We see this happening in North Korea and in Donald Trump's expectations. This nationalism, is compatible with the global world. And there's some doubts about the future of democracy throughout the world. There's been political speakers and thinkers who have thought that Trump may be the last president. Well, that's yet to be seen. Democracy is what it is. There's not a single one system that's not going changed throughout time. All right, now this has been the chapter on politics. I hope you've enjoyed it. Hope you get something out of it. Don't forget, look through your textbook, mark it up, get it ready, so when you do have preparation for a test, you're not wondering what's on the test. If it's been covered in the videos, it's on the test. All right. Good luck, everybody. Enjoy the day.